Do you want to have a hunter build that allows you to not only synergize directly with your weapons, but destroy everything in your path and have extremely high ability uptime? Well, this is the video for you on Strand Hunter with the new aspect Whirling Maelstrom. Now, Whirling Maelstrom is a very, very good damage over time and area of effect damage aspect. Firstly, we'll start off with what weapons that I like to use with this setup. Firstly, I like to use Quicksilver Storm, as it allows you to generate tons of tangles, and it also does a ton of damage since it is an exotic primary. In the secondary slot, I like to use Forbearance, as it's another great add clear weapon, which is really what this build is focused on. Lastly, for heavy, it's good to run a machine gun or a sword for movement, but again, if you did want to use something like a grenade launcher or a rocket, you can in a DPS scenario. The exotic for this build we're going to be focusing on is 6 Coyote. 6 Coyote essentially gives you a second dodge charge. This is going to allow us to synergize between our grenade, melee, and dodge a lot easier. Now let's move on to the gameplay loop. Firstly, with 6 Coyote, you'll have 2 dodges, and you'll also have 2 grenades thanks to the hunter aspect, Widow's Silk. You'll be using multiple different mods and fragments to generate ability energy using each of these abilities. Whenever I dodge, I get my melee back, and I use my melee to generate grenade energy. Also, my grenade suspends targets, which when defeated, create ability energy for my dodge. This all works together to make a really fun circular gameplay loop for all 3 of your abilities, and also has tons of survivability. Now, let's move on to the subclass itself. Firstly, we'll be using the Gambler's Dodge to recharge our melee ability. For the jump, you can use whatever jump you would like, as it doesn't really matter, it's all preference in my opinion. For the grenade, you'll be using Shackle Grenades, that way you can suspend targets, which is another prime example of something that makes this build very strong. As mentioned earlier, our first aspect is Widow's Silk. This gives you an additional grenade charge. Secondly is Whirling Maelstrom. Destroying a tangle will weave a violent, writhing mass of strand fibers. The strand mass seeks out and damages targets, emitting unraveling projectiles when it defeats them. Now, also, instead of Widow's Silk, you could use Threaded Spectre if you are a Titan main, because of course, you know, they like to ape everything. Our first fragment is Thread of Mind. You could also use Thread of Wisdom if you wanted to, but for this build, I like to use Thread of Mind. Defeating suspended targets grants class ability energy. Next is Thread of Warding. This is your main survivability asset. Picking up an Orb of Power grants Woven Mail. Next is Thread of Transmutation. While you have Woven Mail, Weapon Final Blows create a Tangle. Our final fragment is honestly the most important one of Strand builds, Thread of Generation. Dealing damage generates grenade energy. This is going to allow you to generate suspending grenades as much as possible. Next, let's look at some artifact mods. For one artifact mod, if you wanted to, you could run Void Strand Siphon combo, just to have both together so you don't need to actually use both of the mods to save a little bit of energy. Thanatotic Tangles. Strand Weapon Final Blows have a chance to generate a tangle. We are using Quicksilver Storm, so you don't really need this artifact mod, but it's nice to have with other weapons like the Navigator. Next, we have Communal Pickups. This is great for team scenarios like raids or seasonal activities or dungeons, etc. Now here is another one that increases the synergy between your 3 abilities, Refreshing Pickups. Picking up a Tangle or Elemental Orb grants energy to your least powered ability. Now this is my preference. You could use something like Elemental Munitions if you wanted to, but I like using Frenzied Stacks. Your armor charges grant bonus damage to your thrown tangles or elemental orbs. Now for the last artifact mod, I like to choose between these two, Monochromatic Maestro and Rapid Fire Ranger. Rapid Fire Ranger is going to allow you to weaken enemies almost 24/7 with your weapons. Monochromatic Maestro is a great way to synergize between your Quicksilver Storm and your abilities. Now, moving on to armor mods. Firstly, we have Void and Strand Dual Siphon, but obviously you can use Strand if you want. This all just depends on what weapons you're running. Next, we have Heavy Ammo Finder. You can also use Scouts if you want, if you have an open slot. This is just something that is very important, especially with the nerf to double special. Gauntlets are the most important, in my opinion, in this build, as it does have 3 different mods that have incredible synergy between each other. Focusing Strike. Grants class ability energy when you cause damage with a melee attack. Bolstering Detonation. Grants class ability energy when you cause damage with a grenade. And lastly, for the gauntlets, we have Impact Induction. Causing damage with a melee attack reduces your grenade cooldown. Now, as you can see, all 3 of these are going to synergize as one buffs the other. For the chest piece, as always, I like to run triple damage resist with 1 concussive dampener and 2 other elements depending on the activity that I'm doing. Now for the boots. You can either run Elemental Charge or a Strand or whatever element you're using, Weapon Surge. Firstly, you have a choice between Elemental Charge and a Weapon Surge. I like to run Elemental Charge as it does give me some armor charge, but it is nice for my weapons to constantly do more damage. So, up to you. Next we have Innervation. Reduces grenade cooldown each time you pick up an Orb of Power. Our last one is another survivability tool, along with our Woven Mail. Recuperation. Replenishes health each time you pick up an Orb of Power. Now for our final armor piece, the Cloak. We have 2 bomber mods, so that whenever you're using your class ability, which you will be a lot, you will get grenade energy back. And another one is Reaper. After using your class ability, your next weapon Final Blow spawns an Orb of Power. This is great for not only getting grenade energy, but also having Woven Mail up almost 24/7. Now, the 3 stats you need to focus are Mobility, Resilience, and Discipline, as they allow you to get your abilities a little bit faster to just help you out with that synergy just that little bit more. Thanks for watching today's video. If you enjoyed, consider hitting the subscribe button with post notifications on so you don't miss any other builds, DPS tests, and more. Comment down below if you're enjoying this season so far and what's your favorite part of it. Have a great rest of your day, Guardians, and peace.